Politics is that which concerns the affairs of state, as Aristotle is defined. It is the science and art of government. Policy, instead, is the course of conduct, a way of behaving based on certain principles. Politics seeks to coalesce consensus to govern. Policy, instead, seeks to coalesce consensus in order to do something. Since one thing is to stay in power, another thing is to get people to do what you want. In a certain sense, one would say that the purpose of politics is policy. The problem is that the two elements enter in conflict one with the other. Sometimes, if one enacts policy, one destroys the power of politics that one has obtained because one goes against the interest of this or that group. Other times, policy has to be abandoned simply because it is necessary to hold on to power in order for the government to continue, and politics becomes all-important. Rules and laws are broken, so to avoid revolts and revolutions. The problem is that in modern societies, politics, in order to further itself, has been ignoring correct policy, and this has been made evident in the enormous public debt accumulated by governments worldwide. Thus, what can we say? Should a society be based on politics or on policy? Which path should we choose? Which path should we prefer? Should we want a government of technocrats based on scientists, on economists? Or should we wish a community that is democratic, with politicians, with minorities, with groups which raise their voices for this or that reason, based quite often on trivialities? Which of the two paths is best for our society? Let us present the reasons for politics. Let us consider a democratic community that permits the smallest of groups to raise their voices to present their case. Thus, let us give importance to politics, to the coalescing of the willpower of the people. The first reason in favor of politics is that politics permits to pursue the dreams of a community. Ideologies can be adopted with a higher purpose. Democracy, socialism, even the freedoms of capitalism that are born through liberalism are possible thanks to politics, a choice of a community to pursue a certain ideal. The second reason in favor of politics is peace with consensus. Politics quite often bribes minorities with concessions, so to silence protests, permitting an elite to stay in government and govern according to the idea which was previously adopted, previously consented upon, which might be democracy, which might be socialism, which might be liberalism. The perduring peace, which is born through the consensus, permits riches within the community to develop, and the continued pursuit of the agreed upon ideal. The third reason in favor of politics is that politics listens to the need of the small and the less considerate, even if they have little or no impact on the system, which is good and honest. You never know, a small community, a small group can start a revolt. A coup d'etat quite often is done by a small organized, a minute organized group which can strike with precision and capacity within the community. Politics listens to even the smallest of voices, and thanks to the listening of the smallest of voices, peace is maintained. The fourth reason in favor of politics is that politics permits compromises which allow the pursuing of the dreams of other members of the community. It does not limit itself to the dreams of the community itself, the broad objectives of the communities, which might be, for example, socialism, liberalism, or whatever, but it also permits the small dream of the individual that is not necessarily part of a majority to take place, to manifest itself. This brings to a growth of diversity of pursuits in the community itself, and the diversity of pursuits permits a richer community, as a different pursuit might bring to a different element of well-being which the community itself would not have obtained there where it had been too focalized on its main objectives. Politics considers diversity, and through diversity there is prosperity and riches. Now let's consider the reasons in favor of policy, in favor of a so-called technocratic government. First of all, policy making, unlike politics, is based on strict parameters. Thus it permits correct management of public affairs in order to obtain a result. Policy seeks results. Politics seeks to stay in power. There's a difference. Thus, seeking results, one has to follow a recipe in order to obtain results. And that is what policy seeks to do, to formulate the right recipe to obtain results and to apply it. The second reason in favor of policy is that policy seeks to fix issues even when there is no relevant consensus, which means that when something needs to be done, the society needs to apply the correct policy to do that particular action. An example of this is when there is an economic crisis. Economy is a science. Yes, consensus is necessary and politics is important, but at the same time a recipe needs to be followed in order to obtain a result. Quite often it is difficult to follow these recipes, which is one reason why governments tend to fall. But there where there is a crisis, there where there is a deep recession, political differences are put aside and policy starts to take the upfront central position. The main purpose is the solving of the problem rather than deciding who is in power. Thus the recipe becomes more important than those who enact the recipe itself. That is when policy becomes more important than politics. Seeking to fix the problem becomes central. This leads us to the third reason why policy can be more important than politics. The reason is that there where there is too much conflict in politics, correct policy, through responsibility, can bring harmony in politics, permitting action to be taken and results to be achieved. Responsibility focuses on a common objective of all parties. Wanting to achieve that common objective, the parties put aside differences which would be natural in the everyday political arena and decide to focus on what is necessary to obtain the results that are required in that particular circumstance, which is why responsibility is so useful to solve problems in a situation of crisis, which is why responsibility paves the path to policy and policy making. The fourth reason in favor of policy making is that policy making is an impartial allocator of resources in society, whilst instead politics allocates issues quite often seeking to benefit the most numerous minorities or seeking to benefit single members that are part of the majority. The problem with politics is that politics is corrupt. Policy making in order to achieve results has to be the opposite, has to have a high degree of purity. Thus the issue is, how can corrupt people, how can politicians become policymakers? Quite often policy making is exercised by technocrats, by impartial individuals which in our modern societies, in our Western democracies, work for the politicians. Once we have considered some of the reasons for and some of the reasons against, it is good to arrive to a personal conclusion ponderating the various elements. Politics, through the acceptance of wide diversity, permits consensus and peace, which makes a country rich, but policy keeps a country healthy. Thus, policy should rule a country, not politics, and policy should strongly limit politics in order to permit a perduring prosperity in society. Yes, politics permits, particularly if we consider democratic countries, permits riches and prosperity to accumulate, but then things go wrong. Politics, because of its very nature, is corrupt. Thus, if we wish a prosperous and healthy society, it would be best to have a country of technocrats with the input of politicians, rather than have a country of politicians that once in a while listen to the technocrats. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video of today. Leave a like and subscribe, and don't forget to check the channel to see if there are other videos that might be interesting for you. Bye bye, see you the next time. Bye bye.